we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, July 10th, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. Today we have an exciting show for us. We are reviewing two movies. As always, the first is the new comedy from Adele Lim, Joyride, as well as the fifth entry in the Insidious franchise, Insidious: The Red Door. First off, I just want to spotlight a comment. Andrew Barr, just saying have a good show. Thanks, Barr. Really means a lot. But without further ado, I say we jump right into our first review, that being Joyride. And joining me is the one, the only, he helped me review Jason Momoa's cocaine antics in Fast X, Matthew Chen. Matthew, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, yeah. When I saw you reviewed Joyride super early, like earlier than most of us, I was like, I should get Matthew on for this show. I feel like he would enjoy it. So I say we just jump right into the review.
Yeah.
What do you say?
For sure. Yeah. Let's get started.
All right. Yeah. So Joyride, directed by Adele Lim. This is about two friends who have known each other since they were children, around the ages of, I'd say, like maybe 9 or 10 is when they met each other. Both of them are of Chinese descent, although one of them is adopted, so she never really knew her birth parents, that being Audrey and Lola. Years later, Audrey is trying to become a very successful lawyer, while Lola is just trying to make it as an artist. Both of them have very different personalities. Audrey is a very much more like professional, career-based vision, while Lola's very much like an anti-authority person, pointing your middle finger up, very crazy. And Audrey is taking a business trip to China, and they essentially decide, you know what? While we're here, let's see if we can meet my birth parents while we're at it. They are joined by Audrey's college friend, a friend from college, Kat, played by Stephanie Sue, and Lola's cousin, Deadeye, that is their nickname, played by Sabrina Wu. Matthew, going into this movie, just like usually I'm like, hey, what do you think about this franchise going in? But like, it's not a franchise. So what I will say is, watching the trailers for this movie, what were your hopes and what were you expecting walking in?
Yeah. I remember watching the trailer for the first time because it was just like hot off of like Stephanie Shu's Oscar nomination. I think like sometime after the Oscars. So I was like, okay, this is the next movie that she's going to be in. Might want to check this out. And I thought the trailer was pretty funny, not exactly like what I was expecting. And like when I watched it, I got way more laughs than I was expecting.
No, 100%. Yeah, like you said, it seemed like this trailer hit right at the perfect moment when like all of us were going crazy over Stephanie Sue. In case some people didn't know, Stephanie Sue is the person that plays Joy in Everything Everywhere All at Once, that being Evelyn's daughter. And seeing her in like the supporting role, I was like, oh, I really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Stephanie Sue was incredible in that film. Probably should have been the one to win the Oscar for that movie. So I'm excited for this movie. Trailer made me laugh. And Matthew, what I will say is, when it comes to comedies can get away with a lot of things, whether it's like maybe cliches or like awkward moments, as long as if they accomplish one simple thing, and that is that for the majority of the movie, it's funny. And that is the number one thing I will say about Joyride, is this is a funny movie and one of the best comedies I've seen in theaters in like years. Matthew, did you just find this movie like at its core just funny in general?
Yeah, I think just like from the first scene, honestly, like I just started laughing out loud, and it wasn't just me. Like my whole theater, I was surprised because I got an early showing and the whole theater was full. And it was like so loud. There's so many laughs that I couldn't hear some of the dialogue sometimes. And I think it just like it has such a quick pace that you just are gonna be laughing a lot.
Yeah, thinking about that first scene, like, there's something funny to me when kids swear, and when you have just young Lola just telling this kid to F off, I was like, okay, I'm into this movie. This is a movie that is not going to hold back in its comedic tone by any means, and I really do think it is able to narrow that line in certain moments. We'll talk about specific moments as we go on, but another reason why I think this film works is because I think all four of the leads are really, really good. I think each of them have standout moments. My personal favorite was Sabrina Wu as Deadeye. They're definitely supposed to be like the weird character and like the chaotic one. When we're introduced to Deadeye, we immediately know like they're going to China because they want to meet their like K-pop fans, and like no one knows whether or not they're real. And like all the moments they have of just saying like random things, it could get super annoying. But I think Sabrina Wu does a great job at portraying the character. Matthew, what did you think of the cast as a whole, and was there someone who really like stood out to you?
Yeah, no, I think this the four group, like, they just have such a natural chemistry, and so it's just really funny to see them bouncing off of each other. And also, my personal favorite is also Sabrina Wu. I think they did an incredible job of portraying Deadeye, but there are also just, I think every character has a like moment to shine. I think they all have a moment of growth as well. And I mean, like, we
Yes.
talked about the K-pop thing. There's a great joke there where the K-pop group like leads into it. Not going to go too much into detail, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I weirdly think if we're talking about like individual like character arcs, I think Kat may have had like my favorite arc throughout the film. Kat is the one played by Stephanie Sue. Now, when the character is first mentioned, we hear this character definitely got around in college. Many a men she slept with, and now she's an actress. She is engaged, and she's essentially been living this lie to her extremely religious fiance that she has never been with a guy. And just like and I think it's helped by the fact that Lola very clearly hates Kat because she sees Kat as a threat, as like, no, I'm Audrey's best friend. I'm the one who was always supposed to be. And so every time she's lying, she's just Lola's just having just a ball with all the crap that Kat is spilling towards her fiance and towards all her friends, even though they all know the truth. I also think a really great plus of this movie is the relationship between Audrey and Lola. Like, I think this is a classic sort of friendship trope we see in a lot of movies where, like, you have the one very responsible friend who is very much like, no, this is the way I live my life. I don't take too many chances. And you have the other friend who's just sort of like wild, doesn't really have their life together. And while they are friends, you can very clearly see how both of them are annoyed at can be annoyed at one another. Like, Audrey's very much like, Lola, you're never gonna, like, I hate to say it, but I don't think this art job is ever gonna really fall through. And Lola just says, well, you're my friend, you're supposed to support me. What did you think about this, about the friendship between Audrey and Lola?
No, I agree. I think that, like, you know, their friendship is very complex. You know, there's a lot of different like, they affect each other in so many different ways, and like how they both help each other grow, but also like there's gonna be some fights. And I think that portrayal is very well done.
No, absolutely. Going back to like the really like, I think what makes this movie work is the fact that it does have so many great laugh out loud moments. Is the fact that I think this movie knows when to pepper in its jokes, but it also knows when to go crazy with certain things. I think everyone saw from the trailer a big moment of conflict in this movie is when the characters end up on a train and they have to smuggle drugs because they don't want to get arrested. I think this leads into probably my favorite joke, which is later in the movie when they're at the hotel and the big what I will describe as a sex montage where you see how all the characters are just like reacting. Once again, I think Stephanie Sue's moment in that is the best because she's not cheating on her fiance, but when the cocaine explodes in her butt, what was your favorite moment? Like, what do you think was the funniest moment of this movie, Matthew?
I like, that's like a great moment. I think just like how chaotic it gets, and like with all these characters, and they're like they're on drugs, and so like how it affects them is really funny. I think like the K-pop scene, I think that's like where it just like went all out,
Yeah. No, yeah. I could definitely see that scene losing some people just because it's the one scene where it sort of goes into like a fantasy realm where you're literally just kind of like watching a music video. But for me, I think it just works because I think the movie had earned it, and the payoff to that scene, we learn something about the character of Kat throughout the movie, and the revelation at the end of the K-pop scene when you finally see what she's been hiding, you're like, oh, I'll be honest, like, this is an R-rated movie. It's pushing NC-17 at points. Like, you see some certain things that would normally not get past an R-rated film, and when you see that, I'm just like, okay, this is the type of movie we're in, and I'm happy this comedy was able to go that extra mile. Definitely.
Yeah, especially with how like hard it is to see a comedy in theaters nowadays. Like something that is pushing the envelope this far is really cool to see.
Yeah, like I just think like 2 weeks ago, No Hard Feelings came out, which is a movie I enjoyed, but I just think this movie does it so much better. I think it's just because I care about the characters so much more. And I think this movie never really loses its steam at any point during the movie, which I think is really, really great. I think one of the reasons why it doesn't lose its steam is because this movie is like a little over 90 minutes. I think it's like an hour 35 with credits. And honestly, all for that. I've always said, like, if you were a comedy and you are over an hour 40 minutes, I feel like you have to earn that runtime. And this movie was wisely like, look, this is going to be a fun road trip comedy. We're going to have a few moments where we make you feel, where we get a little emotional. But for the most part, it's just going to be an hour and a half in, out. I love that. Matthew, did the runtime work for you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was like the perfect amount of time for like it all. I mean, honestly, I would love to see this group again, like in another movie. I could totally see them go on another adventure, and I think I would have a blast. But like, I think it ended at like the perfect amount of time.
I kind of want to talk about some of the faults I had with this movie. This is a fault that I find in a lot of comedies. I think the genre of comedy is usually the one that is most prone to certain cliches. And one of my least favorite cliches in movies is when you establish early on that a character is lying, specifically to one of the characters that they are supposed to be friends with. Because when that happens, you know there's going to be a part, usually towards the end of the second act, beginning of the third act, where this lie is revealed and these characters get into a big fight. And you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to end up resolving. They're going to end up making up. And I think it's just kind of like a lazy form of conflict, especially at this point. Like, you really got to go the extra mile for me in order to make that subplot work. And this movie does that. We learn early on that Audrey is going to be moving to LA for the summer and essentially to move away from Lola. And the second this plot point is introduced, you know exactly how a good portion of this movie is going to go, regardless of how many great things we experience to get to that point. We know when we hit the point where the lie is revealed to Lola that this movie is just going to stop like a brick wall. And unfortunately, that kind of did happen. Now, I will say it's saved because there's a certain character element about Audrey that is revealed that I think is really, really unique. But if I'm being honest, the lie revealed plotline was probably my least favorite thing about this movie. What did you think about that plotline, and were there any like negatives that really stick out in your mind, Matthew?
I totally understand that because I am not a fan of the liar revealed plotline, but I felt like in this movie, at least, it was handled well. Like, because we had seen so much of these characters and like their dynamics together, I feel like when it finally came to it, it made a lot of sense of like how everyone reacted, basically.
No, 100%. And what I will say is when you do have that big fight scene between Lola and Audrey, I think the moment that I think emotionally affected me the most is Deadeye witnessing this and Deadeye finally thinking that they've had like that they're finally part of a friend group, and just that soul crushing moment of like, oh no, these people are just gonna go their separate ways, and I'm not, and I'm once again I'm gonna be alone. And I really think Deadeye in a way is kind of the heart of this movie because they're the one with like the most like childlike point of view about the world, and that's what got me through that portion of the film.
Mm-hmm. And I also like the thing about Deadeye is like this whole trip, like they don't really have any friends. They're socially awkward, right? But throughout this trip, like because they're bonding with the rest of the characters, I feel like that also really affected.
Yeah, 100%. This movie does something that I usually don't like in comedies, but I weirdly think worked for me in this movie. That is when a lot of comedies towards the end, they'll just jump forward in time like a month later or a year later or 2 years later. Usually I'm like, okay, this is kind of like a forced, like, I always view that as like, okay, you didn't know how to end your movie, and now you're just ending it like this just to find some way. But it weirdly didn't bother me in this one, and I think that's mainly because I just liked the characters so much. And the ending sort of sets up like, look, if we get a Joyride 2, this is a really great setup, a phenomenal final joke. Once again, it calls back to something that I just think is crazy. But yeah, I really found the ending very entertaining. Matthew, what did you think about the ending?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the ending is it's fantastic, and I really like to see like where these characters have ended up a little bit later. You know, what happened after the you know, when they get back from China is really good to see. And I also feel like another part of that, the ending, is that like there's also some more like representation, you know, like that eye confirms that they are non-binary, and I think that is really good to see. And obviously there's like maybe bisexual characters as well, and I think then the whole movie is Asian representation, which makes me very happy.
No, 100%. Yeah, I thought this movie just overall was really, really funny. One last thing I just want to point out. I think Adele Lim did a really, really great job of just directing this movie as a whole. Something that I think a lot of studio comedies fall into is oftentimes it'll look like you're just watching a TV show on the big screen, and it'll look like really cheap looking. This movie does not have that problem at all. Like you really feel like you're in China. You feel like you're in different sets, and I think that is really I think that really plays well and helps you keep invested in the story. Yeah, once again, like that hotel montage, like the K-pop scene, the movie definitely has like a certain flair when it needs to for directing. What did you think about Adele Lim's direction in this film?
Yeah, I feel like she really brought a lot to this movie, and obviously, like she's known for being a writer because you know she worked on Crazy Rich Asians, Raya, and so I feel like she really brought a lot of that humor into this, but also bringing that like there's the Asian culture to it as well. I thought there's a really funny joke with her Audrey's boss about how he keeps on saying he's an ally, and I just cracks me up every time. I'm not doing this because you're Asian, it's because you're an associate.
Yes, because you're an associate, which is so funny because like I know people like that in real life where like they just love to shout how big of an ally they are, and I think
go to 99 Ranch. I shop at 99.
I think every time it's like, okay, if you have to say it as much as this, maybe this isn't as important to you as you think it is. But I digress. Matthew, before we give our final score, is there anything are there any final thoughts you want to say about Joyride?
The other thing I did want to say is that like when it comes to comedies, sometimes they have a hard time of balancing comedy, and sometimes you need to have that emotional moment. I think because this whole movie is about Audrey trying to find her birth mother, when she finally gets there, I felt like that was one of the most emotionally affecting scenes, and that really got to me.
No, yeah, I think when you finally realize who her birth mother is and the conversation she has with someone who also had a very strong relationship with her birth mother, I think that was super, super effective. It really does save all those moments for the end. Like, it doesn't try to sprinkle those through. It's really like an hour of really great laughs, and then towards the end, it really hits you hard. But yeah, I do think it did. When the movie wanted to have those emotional moments, I think it did make them really, really effective. All right, so Matthew, we review movies here on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is awful, 10 is incredible. If you had to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie?
I would give this a 9 out of 10. I didn't really have a lot of issues with it, but I think it was.
No, absolutely, yeah, 9 out of 10, incredible ranking. Incredible rating. I think I'm gonna go maybe a little lower than you, and I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 videotapes. I think this is a great movie, a ton of laughs. All 4 of the main cast members are giving incredible performances. Like I said, there are just some cliches that I think keep me from absolutely loving it. It's those things where like I wish I could kind of turn my brain off and just ignore it, but I just can't with how much they annoy me. But overall, I think this movie is really, really funny. If you can, I would really recommend seeing this in a movie theater. If you want more comedies like this, I think this is a really, really funny movie.
And I think the theatrical experience enhances it too, because you're laughing with the crowd.
Yes. Yeah. No, I saw this in a pretty full theater, and the whole theater was into this movie. Like, loud laughs at all the important moments. All right. Well, before we transition into our next review, I'm just going to open up to questions and comments. I'm going to ask Matthew a comment. We talked about like how we don't really see like too many like big comedies in theaters anymore. What was the last comedy you really, really loved before this in theaters?
No hard feelings, but I would,
Okay.
I think like that was more recent from this year, but I can't even think of one before 2023.
Last year it came out in I want to say like September, October. I was a big fan of Bros. Like I think
that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Billy Eichner. I think he can be really, really funny. And yeah, I think you've crafted like a really sweet movie. That's one of those movies where like I think if it would have stuck the landing, it could have gone down as like an all-time comedy for me. But I just think it just goes on a little bit too long towards the end. And I think that's one where like I think the runtime does affect that movie because that movie's around like 2 hours. And that's one where you could have ended at like the hour 40 mark and you could have had a perfect comedy. But yeah.
No, I agree.
But yeah, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on Cinemaster's reviews tonight. Before you leave, is there anything you would like to plug?
My letterbox is Matthew P. Chen, and so that's mostly what I use.
Would you like to plug RTFO?
I also have a podcast, Real Ranked. It's been a while since we've done a show because I've just been busy to host, but hopefully that might be back soon.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It's always a pleasure to talk with you about movies. I always love late nights, just getting on stream with the call with you and a bunch of other people. You're always one of the people there. So thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Shout out to Matthew once again for coming on to review Joyride, but we are going to be jumping right into our second review for the night, making really, really good time. Wow, you should know my professionalism when I don't even make the banner for the second film, but that second film is the fifth film in a popular horror franchise, and that being Insidious, The Red Door. Once again, like I said, this is the fifth film in the Insidious franchise, the first Insidious film released in 2011. It follows a family that is being terrorized by a demon known as the Lipstick Demon. All the male family members have the ability to enter a region called the Further, which is sort of like an extra-dimensional region. Something interesting I decided to do with this review was I have never seen a film in the Insidious franchise, and before this review, I was thinking, like, man, should I watch all the Insidious movies to get caught up? But I decided I kind of wanted to see what it would be like if I just walked into the fifth and what looks like the final entry in this franchise and see, does it do a solid job at maybe like catching up a newcomer? Is that necessarily a bad thing? Because I admit I'm coming in blind. That's on me. I would not recommend people just walk in, like open up a book and go to the fifth and final chapter and say, this is what I'm seeing. But I just wanted to see, like, could I keep track of the story just jumping in right here? And I think the movie does a solid job at catching you up. From what I've gathered, the first two Insidious movies are connected. They follow the same family. Patrick Warburton and Rose Byrne are the mom and dad of these kids. One of the kids is played by Ty Simpkins. And did I say Patrick Warburton? I meant Patrick Wilson. Patrick Wilson directed this final installment as well. And from what I've gathered, the third and fourth, they're following a different family. And the fifth one, we are back to the original family, because the first two Insidious movies are definitely the films that are the most acclaimed of those of the franchise. So if we're gonna essentially end this franchise, we're gonna go back to where it started with the Lambert family. Going into this movie, you see one of the final scenes in Insidious 2, where it looks like the Lambert family is getting rid of the lipstick demon. They're finally putting it away. And we open up on this movie, and we are at a funeral of one of the family members. And we also learn that Dalton, played by Ty Simpkins, is going off to college. I will admit the weakest element of this movie is the first 30 minutes. The first 30 minutes of this film is one of the slowest and one of the most poorly paced expositional scenes I think I've seen, not just in a horror film, but in a film in general. Like, all the characters are sort of like emotionally wooden, which from what I've gathered in the movie, I think it's kind of supposed to be like that, because you can clearly tell Rose Byrne and Patrick Wilson are now divorced. Josh, who is Patrick Wilson's character, is trying to connect with his son Dalton, so he's like, hey, can I drive you to school? Dalton is very much like, I just want to focus on my art, and he's like this super like edgy college kid that's going to school for art, so he's just drawing like super demonic pictures because I had a really tragic past. And man, this first 30 minutes, this first 30 45 minutes is just does not work. You have characters just sort of like not reacting to like super awkward moments. It's very awkward still to dialogue. I'll admit the acting is pretty good from all the main actors. Like I said, Patrick Wilson, Ty Simpkins, Rose Byrne does a pretty good job with what they're handling. I will say the shining spot in this movie is Sinclair Daniel, who plays Dalton's roommate Chris. She is definitely the one who I think is having the most fun with this movie. She's kind of like busting Dalton's balls when he first enters, mainly because Dalton's just sort of like very like emotionally reserved and doesn't like to interact with anyone. And she's like, well, we're rooming together, so I guess we got to be friends throughout. And just as the movie continues to go on, and as Dalton, spoilers, I guess, as the demons enter Dalton's life again, she's like, okay, I got to help you through all this. And I think Sinclair Daniels does bring a lot to this character, even though maybe the character doesn't really demand it that much. For a horror movie, this has some of the most telegraphed scares I think I've seen in a long time. It does a lot of shots where like a character will be doing something, they'll move their head, and you'll see like a blurry image out of frame. And every time that happens, you're just like, okay, I know what's gonna happen. You'll have like long moments of characters just like cleaning their room or like drawing a picture, and every time you're like, okay, this is gonna either end with something bad actually jumping out at the main characters, or something jumping out at the main characters they think is going to be a threat, and turns out it's really not a threat at all. And I think the movie just does that too many times. Again, if you do that maybe once or twice, you can kind of give it away with it. This movie does this like 5 or 6 times, and by the sixth time, you're just like, can we just move on? You gotta be more, you gotta try harder when you are making a horror movie like this. This is Patrick Wilson's first directorial effort, and you can kind of see the like common mistakes you make when you're making your first movie, where it just kind of feels a little low energy, and I think the movie just never really does a great job at picking up from that. I'd say the second act is probably the best act in this film. This is the one that is the most focused on Ty Simpkins as Dalton, and when him and Chris are just trying to think like, how am I going to get rid of this demon where every time I'm in a dark room, it tends to try to attack me, and just how they try to communicate with it, how they try to get rid of it. When Ty Simpkins realizes that he can enter this different dimension and sort of see things that he's not supposed to. I think that's the most entertaining part. But then the finale of the movie, it's weird. I think one of the other main issues with this movie is it doesn't know who it wants to be the main character. Now, I have not seen the other films, so I don't know if Dalton or Josh is normally the main character of this franchise, but it keeps on swapping the focus between Ty Simpkins and Patrick Wilson, that at one point you just got to ask, okay, movie, you need to decide at a point who is the focus of this movie and who is the one I should be giving the most amount of attention to. Because if I'm being honest, I don't think either of these characters are too terribly interesting. And I think that really leaves a mark when the movie's trying to give equal amount of time to both of these characters. Also, the score by Joseph Hishara, it sounds like it was made from like unlicensed music. Like, I know that's a weird complaint, but I just gotta say this is the most like basic like horror movie orchestral score I think I've heard in a long time. It just sounds like it was like they just went to like YouTube Music or like Apple Music and just found like just free music that they could just put right into their movie, and it just doesn't do a great job at holding your attention or building any sort of real atmosphere in this film. What I will give the movie credit is this movie was billed as the final Insidious film, and it doesn't even try to like tease like, oh, maybe we're gonna make another one if this one makes a good amount of money, which, judging from the box office, it actually did make a decent amount of money. I think it doubled its budget, and I think that's in large part due to the fact that this movie was only made for $16 million. But yeah, I think this movie did a great job at showing restraint and saying like, look, if we're gonna build this as our final film, we're gonna treat it like our final film. But yeah, other than that, this movie doesn't really offer that much, unfortunately. If I were to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I would have to give it a 4 out of 10. I don't think this is a good movie. I think it's actually a quite bad movie. It doesn't really have any like truly abhorrent and terrible moments, except for maybe that first 30 minutes, which is just so slow and so boring and so overly methodical that it's so hard for the film to get your attention again. But yeah, I just don't think it's that good. Don't do what I did. If you've never seen an Insidious film, there's no real reason to go see this movie. If you've seen all of the other ones and you've enjoyed it, maybe you'll enjoy this one, but I'm just saying from an outsider perspective, I was not a big fan of this movie. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This does bring an end to our show this week. It seems like record time. Only 33 minutes. It doesn't seem like I've had like that short of an episode in a while. But hey, I'll always take a shorter runtime. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. We always have a ton of great shows. If I can plug one show coming up this Friday, Film Coven is debuting. Kelly Meehan and Melissa Woody, two of the people at the video store, they're diving into the world of women in film, and I think it's going to be an incredible show. Both those, I'm good friends with both of those people, and they're both excellent talkers when it comes to movies, and I know how much passion they have for that subject. But yeah, we have new videos on the video store coming out every single week. And yeah, just remember to join me every Monday for Cinemaster's reviews. Next week, big review coming up. Only one review. I think I'm gonna be. I think I'm gonna do another segment, but only one major review, and that is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Everyone I talk to, it's one of their most anticipated movies of the summer for a reason. Mission Impossible is on such a great streak as compared to most other franchises. So I'm very, very excited and looking forward to seeing how that movie is able to deliver. Hopefully, this final chapter in the Mission Impossible franchise. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This week. See you next week. And as for now, have a great night.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.